You're listening to the Public Sector Show by TechTables, a podcast dedicated to sharing human-centric stories from CIOs and technology leaders across the city, county, state, and federal agencies, joining in the conversation and touching the hearts and minds of leaders across technology today. From mission-driven leadership to cloud, AI to cybersecurity, workforce challenges, and more. Never miss insights from peers and vendor partners across the public sector. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to techtables.com and drop your email to subscribe. New podcast episodes come out every Tuesday and Thursday, along with weekly Behind the Mic newsletter. And one of today's podcast sponsors is TechTables Plus, an engaging new community where you can have early access to never-before-released episodes, early access to live event recordings, early access to weekly 3 interesting learnings, early access to live event ticket purchases, no episode ads, and more, plus 3 extra special bonuses when you sign up today. Bonus number 1, access to the CEO show. Bonus number 2, access to the Higher Ed show. And bonus number 3, access to the Digital show. Join TechTables Plus today. As always, thank you for supporting the TechTables Network. All right. I know there's always a little bit of so just give it 1 minute and we'll I'm gonna go check this on my iPad. One Take Tony. Did I just say that live? Can I say that live?
Tony. Listen, I like it.
Tony, I feel like I learned a lot about you yesterday, even though it's like our first time talking. So like are you a boxer? And you're like, no, I'm not really a boxer.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Yeah, no, there's a lot. Yeah.
You look like you could be a boxer though.
Oh, thank you. I'll take that.
I received that. Received that.
Okay, you said you're not that interesting. I definitely don't believe you on that at all.
No, he's not.
After an hour and 30 minutes.
He's really not.
Okay, so we are live. We're going to have folks come on, and Jamie will come on at some point. He's I've been following Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez because they're releasing the Florida Cybersecurity Grant Program. And I just see her posting everywhere on Twitter, and I just see Jamie standing next to her. And I'm like, hey, Jamie, I'm texting you right now, but you're just... Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So we're just going to start, and Jamie will show up at some point. 15 minutes late, 30 minutes late. Yeah. One quick thing, the Orlando. So I've got this these live podcaster events, Tony. And because we're going to watch the first round of March Madness together, the game is at 1:00. And so I had to throw the earliest. So we're starting at 7 a.m. And I'm like, I don't know if Jamie's going to show up at 7. He's like, just bring coffee, all of it.
Yeah.
All the coffee.
Well, I wish you luck in that endeavor, I'd say. Oh,
he's coming on. He's coming on.
The bet.
But with poor audio quality, so does it really count?
He might be like on his iPhone.
No, I'm on laptop. Can y'all hear me audio?
There he is.
But I can't get video.
We don't want to see you anyways.
I know. I mean, if you knew, the thing about this is I was actually 5 minutes early because I was not going to listen to jokes about being late.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right, I can go really poor. Let me hang on, guys. This is like an exercise in patience today.
This is 100% what I expected. So I actually blocked off the time for this portion of it.
Let's I have no idea
what time. This is kind of like the time where we threw Jamie a birthday party. There he is.
There he is.
Wait, keep going with the birthday party because I think we need those pictures.
Do you remember this? All right.
Of course,
your birthday party at your house. Yeah, Tony. No, we're going here. We're
No,
going
we
there.
should bring the picture. Is what we should do.
And I'll find the picture. Don't worry. You guys talk. I'll find the picture.
Good.
And we told Tony that the theme of Jamie's birthday party was dress as your favorite 18th century president. 19th century president. And
That's right.
so sure enough, I came wearing this, Jamie came wearing that, and Tony came in his best Grover Cleveland and crushed it. Kept the
Like,
top hat on all night, the cigar.
Yeah.
It's incredible. We'll find it, Joe. We've got.
Is that going to come out? I want to see these photos. We can link to that in the show notes.
I got
by
you.
the way. Okay.
I got you.
So so like
Don't worry.
I was trying to figure out if Joe realized what he actually got himself into on this one.
I don't think he has any idea. And I told him, I said,
idea.
hey, this is the first time the three of us have been in a room virtually or physically together at the same time in like a decade. So I have no idea what's going to happen.
Correct.
But it's going to be
And we're
must-see LinkedIn TV.
And we're live. This is going to be incredible.
Yeah, no, it is. Like I had people come in the office and they were like, hey, where are we watching this thing? You know, whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about watching this thing? And they're like, yeah, it's like live. We got a link, like the whole thing. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. But I was like, let me just give you a prep here. Like, this is roast more than pod, right? Like, this is like three best friends getting together that could miss a decade, and we can still find a way to make fun of Tony, and it's going to work just fine.
God bless it. Man, I miss you guys.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Is this the part where we acknowledge that Tony is the accidental guest?
This is it. This is the.
Tony, I like you more and more. I don't know how we didn't connect when I was in Tampa a couple weeks ago, but
we'll have to do it. I look forward to it, Joe.
And oh man, this is gonna be too good. We might not even edit this. Like we just turn around.
Why would
I'm
you?
I'm not editing nothing. Okay, we ready to do this?
Let's do it. We're doing this.
Let's go. There's no prep for this one. Like, this is the only pod I've ever been on with 4 people where it's literally like no dress rehearsal, no prep calls. There was some emails. I ignored them. Tony's still looking for the big blue E. And then like just roll the ball and let's go.
I love that we're all together. All right, so welcome everyone to today's LinkedIn Live with Jamie Grant, CIO at the state of Florida, Jordan Raynor, chairman at Threshold 360, Tony Desisto, COO at Franklin Street, who are, as if you're watching the pre-pod, are really 3 really good friends, or 2 really good friends, and Tony's on the side. They're going to take us back over a decade of their startup experience, if we even get to that, in the city of Tampa, and how these entrepreneurs are championing citizen. Oh, yes. Do I get to, is this a new one? We're sharing screens now. That's what I'm talking about. That's going in the show notes.
Oh, man. God.
Well done, Jordan.
God bless the internet. God bless the internet. Internet never forgets.
The purpose of
like half the people at the party were like, "Who are you dressed up as?" Like, and Tony's like, "Grover Cleveland, duh."
We're losing our entire audience.
Tony, we gotta have a follow-up. I gotta know more about this, about that Halloween. And what were you after that? Did you up
Oh, it
anything?
wasn't Halloween. No, this is just a regular old get together.
This was
this was a birthday party where everybody was in on the joke but Tony.
Yeah.
Kind of like
Jordan
this
was like,
podcast.
so Tony hides it really well, but he's the smartest guy on this pod, right? Like deep down underneath that wrapping paper is like brilliant guy. Like legit. Yeah, really well. Like I don't know if you're smarter or better at hiding how smart you are. And so like he could actually walk you through like Grover Cleveland's State of the Union and why Grover Cleveland is his favorite president. And you wouldn't necessarily get that when you meet him. And so Jordan was absolutely certain that we could get Tony to fall for dress up theme party, birthday party. And he was right. And so Tony showed up as Grover Cleveland. Right. We all showed up as ourselves.
Yeah. Magical night.
So I know Tony's the smartest because I read Make Tampa
which Jordan's like, how did you get this book? And I'm like, Amazon.
Internet never forgets.
It's one of the 10 copies that are out there.
Yeah.
I thought
I have one somewhere around here.
Yeah.
I always have people are like, hey, you have a friend with like you have a friend that's a best-selling author. I'm like, you know Tony too? And they're like, no, we need Jordan, like the actual author.
Jordan Raynor. He's got like 7
real books.
Buy his stuff. Those are real books.
Yeah.
Those are real books.
Yeah. He doesn't need the sales. Buy my books.
That's right. That's right.
I'm old enough. I'm old enough to remember when Jordan was like, hey guys, it's dropping today. Can you go buy it? Because nobody knew who Jordan was. Now we're like just introduced as Jordan's friends. Like it's right. Cool to see. But those are real books. Those aren't like self-published.
Wait, Joe, did you read Make Tampa?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh,
all of it?
It's a great book.
It's a great
book. It is the best nighttime reading. I read
the first draft.
Yeah, this is great.
It'll put you straight to sleep.
Oh no.
I love it. My book tour 6 years later. Let's go.
Yeah, this book is fantastic. I'm like media in the public sector. So when I read this, and I'm an entrepreneur, startup. So this spoke to my heart. I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah.
No, it actually is, Joe, it is fantastic. And the other thing I'd say about it is like, you can tell Tony, like we would bust his chops all the time. Like Tony is really passionate about like city and local government. And you can tell when you like look at policy or read the book, it comes through. I still don't understand how he's passionate about city or local government, but like he really, really is. So as much as we like to give him a hard time, he's got like great proposals on like trash pickup efficiencies and stuff, that pothole fixing stuff that really makes a big difference when you're talking about a walkable community.
That was great. That was really great. I like that. Thank you. Thanks, Jamie.
I'm gonna move to Tampa. I was with Jordan. We were on the river on this like little boat in Tampa a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I can do it. I live in Santa Barbara. I need water. I need a city.
Come to Tampa. We'd love to have you.
We're coming. And
would you after this podcast interview, you'd love to have Joe here? I would.
Yeah. No, I think yeah. Come on out.
Everyone else's.
Everyone else's. Yeah. No, I love that. And Tony, if you're not, I don't even think I invited you, but if you want to wear the Groveland Cleveland, I can't even call it. We have a live podcast tour in Orlando. I don't even know how to segue into this, but if you wear this, it'd be legend. Saturday, March 18th.
I will dress up as a president if Tony shows up.
Yes.
Listen, don't threaten me with a good time. I'll be there as Grover Cleveland. I'm on it.
Tony calls Tuesday.
Yeah. I love this. So like I said, we were not even going to get through half of this, and I love this. But the purpose of today is to give everyone a little bit of taste about how we do things a little bit differently at TechTables. I am a startup. We are a startup. My wife isn't here, but she's the one that works with me. It's literally just the two of us. People think we have some giant team. It's literally just me and Jamie Tosti. And we've got a big mantra. And our mantra is you can't innovate your actions without innovating the way you think. So we're going to give you a little sneak peek. The company name is Levity Media. So these conversations are right up our alley. We love to have fun. We love lightness. We love to bring a lot of joy into the content that we create. So Orlando, Los Portofino Bay Hotel, Saturday, March 18th, 7 a.m. I don't know if Jamie's showing up at 7 a.m. He might be like, can I get the 12 p.m. slot? But he's going at 7. It's going to be a ton. It's going to be a stacked house, ton of fun. We've got 3 tickets left. So if you're in the audience, head to techtables.com. All the details are there. And now I'm fully prepared that while we wrote some questions and I said, hey, Jordan, I got these questions. I don't even know if we're going to get through one question, but that's okay. So we're just going to take off. It already took off. But this is where the magic happens. So Tony.
Yes.
We're gonna start with you, Tony.
I love it. Let's go.
Because Jordan took a screenshot of the 3 of you in a text message, just the part that said Tony has the star power. and that we needed you to come on this podcast.
Right.
So, make Tampa. We've got the star power in the house, but I was kind of curious. Take us back a decade. I watched the startup Tampa grind YouTube video, 90 minutes. Went on a 4-mile walk yesterday. I said kind of before, I was like looking at photos of Jordan, Tony, and Jamie wasn't on there. The three of you aged well, by the way. When you were younger, it looked a little rough, but
it's hard to raise capital when you look like you're 12.
And by the way, raising capital, Jordan and Tony talk about raising capital in San Francisco, and every VC was like, yeah, we love your idea. And no one signed up afterwards. I thought it was like pretty funny.
That's
Tony,
right.
so
we do now, less so then, but yeah.
Dude, take us back a decade. What was it like? What's changed in Tampa? It's been 10, 11 years.
Yeah, no. It's a great question. I appreciate you having me on. This is the serious portion, so I appreciate you having me on. This is great. But no, I mean, it is actually interesting vantage point for me to talk about it a little bit. So way of background, which I think you did a little bit, but so my current role, I'm in commercial real estate at Franklin Street. And so I'm viewing the startup scene removed, right? So 10 years ago, Jordan and I started Citizen Investor, which was an interesting company. You talk a lot about civic engagement, which I could talk a lot about, really passionate about, but it was crowdfunding for government projects, for lack of a better word. And I was new to startups, frankly, right? I kind of, this was 2011, 12. There's a lot about startups kind of nationally, but new to the scene in Tampa. Jordan and frankly, Jamie, more familiar with it. Mine was more, hey, there's this, I was coming at it more from the government standpoint. I served on the Tampa Advisory Budget Committee after running a unsuccessful race for city council, and said, hey, this would be a great idea. We should do it. Talk to both these guys. Ultimately, Jordan and I decided to start the company. And that was kind of my first entry into doing a startup. And it was interesting. I mean, I would say more broad than the startup, and I'll let these guys kind of dig into more about the startup scene, but it's how Tampa's changed, right? So you saying you want to come, like, Tampa has changed immensely in that time period. And I think it's become a much more attractive place. I think people who lived here always loved Tampa, but externally it's become a much more attractive place. The amount of development that's gone on, the amount of quality of life stuff that's been done in the last 10 years, and really the last 5 years in particular, I think it's just like changed Tampa's trajectory as a whole, which obviously equates to the startup side as well.
Jamie, what were you doing? What were you doing? These two were out.
Jordan had actually been, Jordan and I have been working together on a couple projects a couple years before. Like, I think if we took you back a decade, we have a quorum of the startup scene in Tampa, like, on this call, right? So, like, it was, Tampa Bay Waves about the same time. So Linda was getting that going over there. But when we started raising with our company, we were told kind of similarly, and we would share a lot of the stories, because Citizen Investor, I think, was a year or two behind us, like chronologically, but the three of us spent a ton of time. And I think when you really describe like an ecosystem, I think our relationships together and as a group kind of demonstrate what it takes for success, because we all three have very, very different passions as far as industries or things we want to disrupt or things we want to do. But it's also a little bit of a Venn diagram. And as you saw in the intro, like, we hold no punches. Like, we're not going to let each other go run off the cliff with like, yeah, sure, it'll work out. That sounds great. We have a lot of fun poking holes in each other's, arguments or thesis to say like, hey, before you go invest time and money and time away from the family, like, have you thought about this? And it's actually a great service and friendship, like in the way of like the verb to be a friend, to tell the truth. And I think you can tell we love telling each other the truth, but I think more importantly, we love each other. Right. And so at the time, like, it was a really small group. We were told all the time, we'll fund you. We love what you're doing, but we're gonna need you to move to Boston, to Austin really kind of early, but the Valley, New York, there's about 5 different markets you could play in. And so we finally had, when we rose our Series B, I remember reading something I think Florida Venture Forum put out, but it was somebody kind of in the space. And our Series B, like just our company Series B, was like 25% of the venture raised in Florida for the quarter, which, like, when I say that now, some people are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But that was really a massive indictment on just how kind of immature and fledgling the startup scene was in Florida. And I think the really cool thing now is, like, nobody says you have to leave Florida, let alone you have to leave Tampa, right? So raising capital prior to a growth stage required you to get on a plane. If you were in Tampa before. Now, like, you might be able to take an Uber. And I think when you look at the talent that's coming out, when you look at the money, and then you look at just, you know, some of the stuff Tony was describing, like, you're really getting to the place where you can launch and build something in the state of Florida that changes the world, and not have to leave Florida to raise capital, to find co-founders, to find co-founders. And I think it's just really cool to watch, because it was a, I think fair to say, like, really, really small group, 2010, 2011, 2012. And to the extent that there was anything in tech, it was really B2B at like mid and growth stage companies. There was nothing on the front end. And then the last thing I'd say for people that are listening that might be thinking about like taking the plunge, Citizen Investor was a brilliant idea, to the point that, like, jokes aside, like Tony not known for technical prowess, like, brilliant mind, right? But he walks in one day and he's like, hey guys, I got this idea. And we're like, okay. And he's like, I want to do a tech startup. And this is just the way I remember it. It's probably off, but we're like, Tony wants to do what? And then he starts walking through like crowdfunding citizen projects. And when you think about it, if anything, some of the challenges in Tampa at the early days were companies that were too right too early. And now you're getting to watch Florida play like center mass, where it's not about being too right too early for survival. It's about, like, can you actually go dominate market share somewhere? And I think Florida has all the potential, and Tampa specifically has all the potential to dominate the next 100 years with what's happened over the last decade. So it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, no, it is a ton of fun to watch. I'm very excited. Kind of like Tony, like, I find a lot of problems with Santa Barbara, just like, because I have a business, so I'm using business services. So I'm like, so you don't take online payments, so I cannot pay taxes. The office is closed, right? So I'm constantly like, what if I could solve 100 problems on the city front of, like, man, we could do tech here, we could do tech here, we could do tech here. Jordan's great because he kind of helps me focus. And so right now,
Joe,
this is the...
real quick, I'm going to add one little element as you transition to Jordan. One of the things, like, to tell you how nerdy this group is, when Tony was talking about launching Citizen Investor, I loved it because I thought it was going to prove that people hate taxes, right? So, like, here you have this notion of like crowdfunding to self-select, and it was kind of like when Norway said, hey, you can give more of your income if you'd like to the federal government. And it was really fascinating to watch. Like, Tony and Jordan could talk all day long about projects that were getting funded, projects that weren't getting funded, like how people chose to use their tax dollars. But underneath, like, the innovation was this really interesting sociological look at how people viewed the taxes they had to give to government versus their elective income.
Yeah, that's a deep insight. Jordan, we were talking about raising capital from the first round. Citizen Investor was more the small friends and family.
Yep.
Threshold 360, different story. Tampa, we just talked about, has changed drastically. Yeah. Could you just maybe kind of dive into, I think, the change with Threshold 360, your ability to raise capital? And
oh yeah, absolutely. So with Citizen Investor, Tony and I raised a very, very small round from friends and family, and there was not a whole lot of early stage capital in Tampa at the time. This was 2011, 2012. There were no, self-identified angels or angel networks in town. Fast forward to when I took the CEO job at Threshold, was the second CEO of this company back in 2016. Even in just that 4 to 5 year time frame, there was a whole lot more early stage capital in the Tampa Bay area. And I did spend a lot of time, I should say a lot of time. I spent a decent amount of time in San Francisco and in Boston and New York, raising money while CEO. But ultimately, we really kept the pool very small. All of the investors in Threshold are still local to Tampa Bay, and we've been able to fund that company's growth by keeping it all in Tampa because there's enough money to go around to fund that company's growth. And so I think Threshold's a really good case study of what we've seen in Tampa, that over a very small period of time, more early stage capital has come to Tampa, stayed in Tampa, is reinvested in Tampa. Jeff Vinnick's a huge reason for that. Tom Wallace and Florida Funders are a huge reason for that. Stuart Bertrand, the founder of Threshold 360, and his partners, the Murray brothers, are a huge part of that. And those are just a few of the many people who have decided that Tampa's a great place to invest and keep companies and grow companies. And yeah, Threshold's just a good little microcosm case study of that. But yeah, to date, all the funding has come from within that Tampa Bay area.
Tony, what are some of the maybe like top 3 startups we should be looking at that are in Tampa right now that everyone should keep their eye on?
I don't know.
Oh, you know, that's a.
Well, I really don't know. I mean, this is what I was saying earlier. I'm the worst person to ask, but like, you know, what's interesting is I'll give you some insight. When we were doing Citizen Investor, you know, you're in the ecosystem, right? And it was small, and it grew over the 3 or 4 years that we were doing Citizen Investor. And you really got to know the other people, right? There is, particularly when it's small, what's great about it is there's a camaraderie that goes into it, right? Kind of everyone working together, and you go to the events and see the same people. But it was good because people were working on stuff, people would fail, they'd start something new, right? And it was a small microcosm of what you get at bigger ecosystems in, you know, like a Silicon Valley, San Francisco. What's interesting to me is actually when you step out of being in that world, how removed you get, right? So like in my current role, I've been at Franklin Street for 4 years doing commercial real estate. Florida Funders is right underneath me, so I see them. But otherwise, other than what I'm reading in Tampa Bay Business Journal, I get very little what's going on in the startup scene, right? And in many ways, I wish I was more plugged in, and I don't know if that's, I think that's sort of probably the next evolution as we talk about the growth of the scene and the capital, as Jordan mentioned, and the ability to take advantage. I think the next step is that ecosystem being ingrained into sort of the broader business community, right? And I still don't think that's necessarily happened yet, although you're seeing pieces of it. So I think that's my legal answer of why I don't know how to answer your question, but I think I did a decent job.
It was a great job. Jamie, so startups have to move incredibly fast. When you're assessing the viability of a startup, what uncomfortable questions do you ask to founders to see if they have the ability to make it?
Man, that's a great question. I think there's probably 2, right? Like if I don't understand how you're going to make money in a way that I can communicate to my mom, then I'm out. And it may be something like super awesome. It might be something that I just can't wrap my head around. But like, if I don't understand how you're going to monetize it in a way that Beverly Grant, almost 80, a saint of a woman, would understand, then like I'm kind of out. I think the
Beverly Grant, my kindergarten teacher, for the record.
That's true.
God bless her.
That's true. World's greatest kindergarten teacher. So I think that's 1. 2, I spend more of my time like drilling on the people, right? So, when you asked the question of Tony, I was kind of laughing. It's like, the difference between then and now is like we could name the 3 startups that existed back then. I was at a pitch day for Tampa Wave, 6-9 months ago, whatever it was, and like, I mean, companies were part of this cohort from Israel, from Germany, from all over the U.S., from Florida. Like people were coming to Florida to be part of a cohort in specifically coming to Tampa for this. And so, you watch this life cycle. But to me, I think, great businesses, great teams are all about people. And so many times we try and mystify it and make it about the automagical whiz bang that you plug in and something will and it just, at the end of the day, like technology is innovation that helps something scale. It's an accelerant, and it's a question of how those people are going to use it. So I'm way more interested in whether somebody I kind of get skeptical when somebody calls himself a founder. Like there's very few people. Jordan's one of those people that is so freaking disciplined. Like he actually did the 4-hour work week. He does getting things done better than anybody not named the author. Like Jordan is so disciplined that like he's one of these people that can legitimately take something on by himself and not have things drop. I'm slightly less focused and disciplined than that. And so like, huge believer in team, right? So when somebody wants to say I instead of we, when somebody wants to be a founder, when somebody has the attitude of like, look, when we're on the mountaintops, it was because of me. And when we're in the valley, it's because of we. Those are the things that I'm out, because no matter what innovation you have, no matter what disruption you have, you're kind of exhibiting that you're somebody who knows what they want to be called or what title they want to have rather than what they want to get done. And I think at the end of the day, like really, and I stress this with my team here, kind of a startup from within government, which is harder than any startup I've ever run, is like startups actually kind of easy. Like you just have to have a really good, solid idea and be stubborn enough and persistent enough. But then you get to this point where you have to scale, and scales where you break or you make, and scales where you find out like how much are you really in the foxhole with your teammates, because things get really hard and the problems are magnified and the consequences are magnified. And so I'm more interested in digging on like kind of almost making the team a little bit uncomfortable, to figure out like how much do y'all really like each other? How much do you really have each other's back? Because no matter how good the business or how big the market, it's all going to fall apart if you don't have a team that'll stick together through the inevitable challenges that range from like pressing submit and not knowing if there's enough money in ADP to pay the team, like to a financial cliff, to losing your biggest customer. Like all these things that are real things have a way of demonstrating like how much you really are a teammate. So to me, I like to kind of make it a little bit awkward, which is sometimes why I invite Tony to those, because he's really good at like just throwing something in there that makes it everybody a little awkward.
Well, admittedly, I'm not very tech forward, as you said before. What again is an automagical whiz bang? Could you?
So you remember when you were looking for the big blue E and it wasn't on? It's because the automagical whiz bang wasn't plugged in.
Gotcha. Appreciate it. Okay.
No, good. Look, you go to these conferences and you hear everybody talk about like it's like people feel compelled to talk smart and hide behind acronyms and do all these things that like want to make you think that it's the technology that's just going to magically make the operation work. And it's like at the end of the day, it's really just an accelerant. It's either accelerating efficiencies or inefficiencies, improvement or problems. And so I'll draw you a diagram later, Keith.
Perfect. Appreciate it.
No, I love what you said about people.
Illustrators for us. Jordan knows illustrators, so I need you to get on that.
Get him on the phone.
Thank you.
I love what you said about on the people front. I coach high school basketball, so I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but I love getting in with the kids and, you get into close games, and it really doesn't come down to the X's and O's. It comes down to, do the kids trust each other? Are they in it with each other? And you can draw the best play in the world, but it's, do the kids trust that they can execute? And that only comes through relationship, and you need that. You can draw up great plays, and they work fantastic when the team trusts each other, and they're going to cover the backside on defense and XYZ, you name it. But I love that you mentioned that. Tony, I want to jump to you. I want to jump to Make Tampa. So yeah. So I'm going to read from the introduction. I promise everyone, though, I did read the book, but I did like, he basically lays out his thesis.
I'm going to read the first sentence, but I swear I read the whole thing.
Hey, Joe, I read the forward too. It was fantastic.
By the way, this is the first time Tony's heard these words in 6 years, so this is going to be great.
100%. Yeah. So yes, please catch me up.
Tony, I'm going to catch you up, and I'm not going to read everything, but I'm going to read maybe give me a paragraph and a half, because I think it was really great.
I love it.
Plans for how to solve the ills of a city are not in short supply. It is not uncommon for candidates, elected officials, and local leaders to develop plans and solutions in response to problems the community faces. Plans are good, the best of which lay out a roadmap for action and give a sense of direction. Unfortunately, too many of these plans consist solely of problems and solutions. Too many are simply a reflection and a reaction to the current system, administration, and direction. That was a great highlight for me. These plans miss the mark because they fail to start at the beginning and determine the purpose and goals of the city and a long-term vision of how to achieve those goals. They also fail in another way. a diversity of opinion, and a lack of collaborative spirit. As the following pages will lay out, I believe the engaging the community in the governing process is one of the most important actions a city can take. I'm going to close with that piece right there in this book. But looking back at the experiences, what insights and lessons have you learned? I know you're doing commercial real estate now, but I'm sure you interact with government on a regular basis in Tampa. Has the government matured? Like, love to hear kind of the behind the scenes from you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That was great writing. I'm
pretty sure I rewrote that for you. Yeah,
I was about to say I don't know who wrote it, but that
doesn't sound like me.
That was unusually deep and well punctuated.
So thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I have stayed, interested in what we're doing, particularly at the local level. I think we actually have a city council election and mayor, although sort of unopposed, but council elections going on here in the city. I was just at a forum the other night, and people are interested in what's going on, right? I was just at the city council forum in here in South Tampa, and there was 250 people that came to listen to the council candidates, talk on the issues. That's awesome, right? That's really great. And oftentimes, the problem is not with a willingness of the citizenry to engage, but in the avenues in which we give them to engage, right? So it's like, okay, you can come to a council meeting. Half are during the day, most people work, or they're at night when they have to take their kids to practice, or they're making dinner, or they just got home from a long day, right? It's like it's hard. This stuff is hard, and people got a lot of stuff going on in their life. And so I think the goal with the book, but just in general, right, is how do we, and this is where it sort of dovetails, right? Because I think technology helps a lot in this. It's not the silver bullet, because not everyone is tech literate, but how do we give more opportunities for people to get involved and share their opinions? One, because it makes them more bought in to what's going on in their city. They feel more part of it as a community. And two, because elected officials, with the exception of the great Jamie Grant, don't have all the answers, right? So I think a lot of them would welcome it if there was a way to funnel it instead of just hearing the loudest voices, or the angriest voices that can take the time to do that, right? The more we can open it up and sort of crowdsource ideas without saying, something buzzy, I think it would be better. I think we'd have better government. So there's been some improvements in areas, and in other ways, I think we're just as far as we were when, I wrote that 5 years ago.
What would it take? What would it take to really move it forward?
Well, one is a willingness, right? So it's not just about the reason you don't have the tools to do it is not just because we don't have the tools. We do have the tools. There's hundreds of them, right? There's a lot of, when we were doing Citizen Investor, a lot of what we were interacting with besides the Tampa startup community was, the more broader civic engagement community. It was actually really cool. We were sort of on the front end of it, but there was a lot of cool initiatives, and there's a lot of good companies that did good stuff. Some of them very successful. C-Click-Fix is one of those that were really doing engagement tools. And while a lot of elected officials or government officials, and actually a lot of elected officials would say they want it, but then when you got to the brass tacks of dealing with the actual government officials, the actual departmental folks, they didn't want it, and you kind of need that buy-in to implement it. So a lot of it is just a willingness to for those people to kind of be bought in the process.
Yeah, no, I love that. And Jordan, this is kind of going to piggyback off the last question. I view it as like startups really need the courage and focus to rock the status quo. And I'm seeing this right now. Like the status quo is so strong. And, maybe kind of walk us through your thought process of like, when you consider like a problem, like, is it worth taking on? Is it not worth taking on? You have experience in the city. It's been a decade. Some things have changed. Some things haven't. Like, is there a problem that you see like worth taking on that would kind of move the ball in Tampa?
Like personally taking on?
Not to give you another venture.
No. I found the problem that, Lord willing, I'm committing the next 50 years of my life to. you know this about me, Joe. I like to think I'm pretty good at dissenting from the kingdom of noise, right? Avoiding information and news that's not relevant to my current life and work. And so I'm so far removed from this that it's hard for me to really spot a problem. I'll notice one that's like uber close to home, like hyper local as you can get. The way that neighborhoods communicate is still insane. Like within a closed community, like I know next door is like playing in this space, but like my neighborhood still defaults to like a Facebook group where people just like scream about yard signs with each other. Like it's a hot mess, right? So somebody's got to fix that problem. I don't know what the solution is. I can't imagine that Facebook groups is it. But there's nothing that like gets me excited the way that the problem of crowdfunding government projects coming out of the Great Recession did when Tony came to me with that idea. Like that was like so clear. It wasn't technology in search of a problem, right? It was like, hey, here's this problem. This is Tony, you and I probably had our first conversation about this in 2010. I think so. There were so many projects just collecting dust on shelves that were pre-approved by the government. They had the permits. They knew exactly what they needed to do. All they needed was cash. You also had citizens willing to spend more above and beyond what they were paying in taxes for those projects. It was like so easy. It's so easy. I mean, it took a genius like Tony to like see the problem, see the solution, and bring it all together, right? But that was clear, right? I think what I see a lot of founders doing today is like looking at new technologies like AI, right? Solutions and like trying and going and hunting down problems. That's usually not where great companies are born out of. Usually it's somebody who understands a problem really deeply. Tony's a great case study of this. Tony was on a boring budget advisory board committee. It's like the most painfully boring thing in the world, but he really understood the problem, right? And that's what helped him see, okay, great. I really deeply understand this problem. I'm now learning about this new technology of crowdfunding, and I can connect these ideas together. I just read a really interesting book called Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. And he talks about
Of course you did.
Of course I did. And he talks about, I forget who invented this methodology. But basically like keeping 12 problems that really interest you top of mind all the time in the form of questions. Right? So for example, like one for Tony would be, he's done this for the last 10 years. Like, how do we use technology to increase civic engagement at the local level? Right. And whatever. And as long as you've got those problems, those questions top of mind, maybe they're on a list next to your desk, you're much more likely to start with a problem and find a solution rather than finding a solution and go chase down a problem, because you're obsessed with the problems. Right. It's great investment advice too for investors. Like investors are obsessed with founders who are obsessed with the same problem over and over and over again. Like there was a really good article back in the day when all the geo location startups were popping up, Foursquare, Gowalla. There was this company called Scavenger. I remember reading this really good piece about Dennis Crowley, who I love, who is the founder of Foursquare. And they interviewed one of his investors, and they were like, yeah, we bet on Dennis because he was obsessive about the problem of geodata. Right? He already had a company that he started and kind of failed with that problem. Then they created Foursquare, but it was obsessiveness over the problem rather than an obsession with shiny objects and ever-changing solutions that makes great founders. That's a very long-winded answer to your question, Joe, but there you go.
But real quick, while you called Tony a genius and you referenced like the Citizen Investor timeline, was that like, it was about 2.5 years after he loaded up the McCain bus with coolers of Miller Lite? Same genius?
Same guy.
Same guy?
Same guy.
Right.
Same guy.
Same guy.
Just so we're
Just
clear.
checking. Listen, Tony's the only guy I know that like problems 1 through 10 are like quantum computing and solving things, and like 11 or 12 are like, what's my middle name and what am I having for dinner?
Fair and accurate. I will say one, Joe, have me on the pod with these guys all the time. I've never been called a genius so many times that I'll take it. But two, I'm so much of a genius, I can't figure out how to turn off the volume on my notification. So I apologize about on the video, but I literally don't know how to do it. So yeah. But anyway, thanks. Keep going. Keep your answers are better than mine. I love what you guys are saying.
Well, Jordan, I have taken Tiago Forte's class, Building a Second Brain. So I'm with you on that one. Jamie, Jordan and Tony look like they retired. So why don't you help us out with this final question? They look like they're out of the scene, washed up a little bit. Kind of walk us.
Tony's looked like that since the first day of law school. Like that's how he showed up at law school. Was like Jordan just kind of gets like mature and like it's like he's becoming like a manifest like wise author, and Tony just keeps looking more and more like a character from Always Sunny.
Tony, you got to come to Orlando. You got to come to. Oh my goodness.
I'm there. Let's do it.
This is too much. Jamie, you travel around the state of Florida all the time. What are just maybe top of mind 2 or 3 problems that you think are worth considering right now as like startups?
Man, I think that's so. I think Jordan said something really, really, really profound. Because Tony is truly this awesome example of how it's supposed to work. Tony literally, like when we reference the Big Blue E, it's because he was trying to find Internet Explorer, and he had already launched a startup. So like there was zero technical knowledge, but there was a very clear obsession with a problem that was a real problem, that was a point in time where he wasn't coming saying, man, it would be really cool if I used AI or put something on the blockchain or published an API to do. It was, how do I solve this problem because people deserve better? I think the second half of that is when you don't come in with a technical understanding, you don't even have the temptation of automating first. Like you have to do it manual. You have to learn it from the ground up. And that's just one of my rules is like, I have a handful of rules when I launch something, but one of them is it's manual until we know exactly what we want to automate, and then we'll start automating. And I think, the example that Jordan gave on the inverse, right, is these people who show up and they're like, hey, there's this really cool technology. Let me find a use for the thing. It's just not as compelling or lasting or likely to succeed as somebody who identifies a clear problem and says like, how can I eliminate unnecessary steps and go? I'd say, it's kind of funny, right? I'm right now like just over a couple days past 2.5 years in this job, which is like I think a year longer than any of my predecessors, which is pretty crazy. But you've heard me say a lot, Joe, that this is my first and only government job I'll ever have. I think one of the things, and I think Tony and Jordan would both agree with this, like it is really hard to do what we do and be thinking about what's next. Like the way that you survive the now is to pour everything you have into the now, right? And so like it can become a challenge to lift your head up and go, okay, wait a minute. I'm kind of getting to a place where it's okay for me to think about what's next without cheating on what I'm supposed to be doing now. I think if I was to focus on, 3 startup ideas, I would focus on some markets that are still relatively untapped, like government, healthcare, and education are all basically the same thing with different products. They are still insanely draconian. They are insanely unsecure. They are insanely vulnerable. We just had the Tallahassee Memorial Health System here shut down for 2 weeks, ransomed, taking nothing but ICU patients on paper, everybody else diverted. And so when you start thinking about what it looks like for the only level 1 trauma center within 2 hours to be ransomed and shut down for weeks, like that should highlight to you, that there's a problem. Education, government, these are areas where kind of the bureaucracy, and Tony was touching on this a little bit, like, I'm not saying they've made me mad enough to ever run for office again, because I don't think that's possible. But like looking at the things that some unelected bureaucrats do to thwart elected and accountable officials in the implementation phase. Let's see if he knows how to answer it. Wow.
I can silence that.
So like
there's a button that says silence.
He reads good. We'll give him that. So like what I didn't appreciate from the policymaker perspective is that you cannot force the operation or implementation, and that there's somebody that's sitting there that is just not there to do it. They don't care. Or they do care, even worse, and they just philosophically disagree or they object to it for some reason. And so like figuring out the long tail of cutting through, whether you call it the swamp, the deep state, or anything else, like these labels get thrown around that make it really difficult to have conversations sometimes in the kind of debate that Tony's describing. But if we're really going to have that kind of honest debate, Like, we got to start asking ourselves how we measure things, how we go, because at the end of the day, and I say this a lot in this role, had a lot of nights putting together board reports for a venture-backed P&L. That's pressure. Like, Jordan and Tony both have had to report to boards and raise capital and all that. That's really hard. I had no idea that having no P&L was infinitely harder. And so, like, managing without a P&L, managing without a balance sheet, managing without earnings, man, that's tough, because there's just no way to, like, level set score and say, like, look, these are the things we value. So I don't know that I totally answered your question, Joe, but I would say I would look at 3 industries: government, healthcare, and education, as industries that are in desperate need of market forces and innovation. Almost all of they all share almost identical traits of no markets, entrenched stakeholders who want to keep the power, stakeholders who like the fact that right now there's a ton of money that goes through it. And I don't think you have to look any further than that school in, I think it was Indianapolis, that spends like $6,000 per kid. We got to send this out if you haven't seen it. But this, like, Tony, this is like right up your alley.
I saw it. Yeah.
So like, I almost sent it to you, because I literally, it was like you and Grady in a tweet. But like, it's a school that spends like $6,000 per head and is like nicer. And I mean, it's, I wanted to go to high school. I never wanted to go to high school in my life, but like at 40, I was like, I'll go there. Because they had cut out like $5,000 of like BS administrative stuff. And so, like, whether it's $6,000 or $9,000, whatever it is, there's this bloat that sits there that's poured in at the top rather than poured into the constituents. And I think if you summed up all the work that the 3 of us have done in the startup space, we've all started with like the patient in mind, or the visitor in mind, or the taxpayer in mind, and built from the ground up to say, like, if you remember who the customer is, then you'll draw up and you'll start hitting enterprise customers, and you'll start hitting the B2B market. But you're kind of tough to beat if you can win the customer, the taxpayer, the patient, or whoever it may be at like the transactional level.
Yeah, I think I
don't think I answered your question at all.
Well, I was gonna piggyback on it, because I think, beyond, again, kind of using our current experience as to dictate the answer. The same is true in real estate and real estate adjacent services, right? I think a lot of people, understandably so, a lot of what gets the press, a lot of what gets the attention is a lot of the consumer facing technology and startups. There is so much to be done in these sort of like older, not sexy industries, for lack of a better word, like government, but honestly, real estate. I mean, the software I see that we, in our clients and our competitors and people use is terrible comparatively to other industries. And so I think there's a big opportunity but again, it's kind of the same point. It's starting with the problem. It's like, you have to really understand what's going on in those industries. But if you do, I think there's a lot of opportunity for disruption.
But Tony, I think there's a whole second set on this at some point, if Joe can put up with it, because like, you're a great example of taking the startup mentality into larger operations. And I think when we think about the life cycle of Tampa, like, your mentality isn't that different at Franklin Street than it was at Citizen Investor, right? That's your right. Approach to problem solving, the way you looked at things, the way you refused to accept the status quo, like, all of that is really no different in the startup world versus, Citizen Investor versus Franklin Street. It's a mindset, it's an operation, it's a mentality. And I think we'll see Tampa take that next step when we go from, a handful of startups and no capital to now a pretty vibrant startup scene. And I think it was you, Tony, that was talking about, or Jordan, one of the two of you was talking about it, like, becoming pervasive in the actual economy every day, like a main vertical there. I think that's because you're going to watch people who had, been punched in the face metaphorically with a startup and gone through that grind and learned what it takes, that then find themselves in a C-suite of a company like Franklin Street that has a bigger reach and really now the ability to apply the same mentality and skill set. So I think there's a lot to be said about, like, not feeling like, and I'm not saying you do, but I think some people, I struggle with it sometimes, like, am I a sellout if I don't go back to co-founding, right? Like, is that just who I am at my core, or like, are there stages of life? And I think there's something to be said about taking freedom and taking liberty to take the exact same skill set and the exact same tools into a little bit less demanding environment, or a little bit more stable environment, but not losing the approach.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Tony, fun fact, and we could talk more. You come to Orlando. I actually started my official business career. I don't know what you call this. Like right after college, I worked at a commercial real estate mortgage banking company. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I got licensed so I could take commission. But I worked as like a junior analyst, reading reports, analyzing deals. It was miserable. I hated it so much. Staring at spreadsheets. And then anyways, made the jump into the software world. But we'll have to talk. We'll have to talk more.
Nice. Yeah. Well, when I'm in Orlando dressed as Grover Cleveland, we will go over that.
Hey, Tony's only invited if he'll put on like the basketball equivalent of a Tom Amansky video to teach your team how to box out, because he looks like a chunky 3, but he's a powerful 4. Like Tony's like Charles Barkley that couldn't jump, right? He's like short, nobody's paying attention, and he finishes the game with 18 rebounds. He's crafty, Joe. You got like the guy can put on a clinic out there.
We played. I don't think we did like the origin story of the group, but Jamie and I met first at law school. We went to law school together, and we were on the same intramural basketball team. And I definitely have stories about that, but probably offline would be like the best place to tell those. But yeah,
only in Orlando.
Only in Orlando.
Yeah,
only in Orlando
event.
You guys are better at this than me.
There you go.
There
you go.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, I could talk hoops forever, but as like Jordan is going to know, we're going to have to redeem our time right now. We have 4 minutes, so we're going to wrap this up. I know we couldn't cover everything. There was a ton of excitement leading up to this. And if you like what you saw today, and I know we're going to throw it out on the TechTables, the public sector show by TechTables feed tonight, which it'll go out tomorrow morning. Fun fact, if you actually in Apple Podcasts type in public sector, we have the #1 public sector podcast in the U.S. ahead of Microsoft, McKinsey, which is a testament really to my wife, who does all the podcast editing and makes me look good. But you won't want to miss this on Saturday, March 18th in Orlando, 2.5 weeks. It's going to be a blast. We got folks from Tallahassee as far down as Miami. There are only 3 tickets left. So come out, go to the website, techtables.com. You're not going to want to miss this one. Tony's dressing
Jordan
up.
said he'd signed books for all 3 of the last tickets. Jordan said personalize whatever you want on them. I'll bring them over.
And Jamie's going to be drinking coffee. Speaking of Beverly Grant, one last shout out to good old Bev from this coffee mug. He's going to bring his little James coffee mug with him to Orlando. If you're drinking out of that. I've just been scrolling through Instagram this entire conversation.
I was about to say, like, there's so many that, like, when you really want to dive in, and before I forget, like, everybody please go buy Jordan's books. Like, I'm not kidding. There's certain things that, like, you can't capture in the podcast. It's not often you have a friend that's like Jordan's really freaking good at what he does. Go buy the books. You'll be better for it. So you got kids books, you got big kid books, you got grown up books. He's got a full suite. But Jordan, like, let's make sure we do you justice, because some of the folks who don't know you as like 360 and not necessarily as a fantastic communicator and writer. That was really just my attempt to be a good friend and to distract you away from Instagram 2012. Because I think there's too many stories on this table. The good news is, like, my next gig is fully private. My next gig is fully unfiltered. So I'll look fun to, in a couple of years, maybe doing another version that's the unplugged.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I love this. And we're going to be in Houston on Wednesday, March 29th at Hotel Zaza. It's going to be a blast.
I just stayed at a Hotel Zaza in Austin. It was fire.
Yeah, I stay at the Zaza every time I go to Austin or Houston.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so great.
Yeah, this
big fan.
Got off the rails, but yeah, it's a great hotel.
Not gonna lie, I didn't know if y'all were joking. Like, Hotel Zaza's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's great.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna be all for today. Many thanks to Jordan, Tony, and Jamie for coming on the pod live. Tony, I'm gonna send you a link. I'll follow up with you. See you in Orlando.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me, Joe. It's great catching up with you guys.
7 a.m. Jamie.
Hey, listen. I am so glad Tony got accidentally invited to this thing, because it was definitely more lively than it would have otherwise been. But, like, that text thread needs to show up in Orlando, because I was super confused, bro.
Oh man.
I thought we were
The
getting a road
accidental
scholar.
guess.
Instead, we got
Killed it.
Tony. It was fantastic.
Just a happy accident. Thanks again.
So many
Miss
jokes.
you guys.
That's what
Have a
they
great
call
one.
me, guys. I'm 14 years younger.
See y'all.
See you guys.
Hey, boy.
You're listening to the Public Sector Show by TechTables, a podcast dedicated to sharing human-centric